Hi guys, my name is Sinji and welcome to my new series. This is Minecraft Building. In this series we're going to be showing you how to build or suggesting how to build different things, and in this episode we are going to be starting off with paths. We're going to be covering paths in Overworld, as this is going to be a two-part episode or two-part series. And in part one we're going to talk about 5 different styles of path that you can use in your Overworld builds in Minecraft. The first path being what I like to call the no path. Yeah, some people out there like to just have plain grass, which is absolutely fine because in Minecraft, you know, it's all personal preference. It's what we like to do, and some people just like to do this. And if you like to do, one of those people like to do that, great, absolutely fantastic, go for it. Because some people just like having no path. But getting on to actual path building itself, the first path we have is what I like to call the village path, because it's a path, it sort of spawns most in a village. It's the very basic path. It's just the one you would use your shovel and you would just tide the ground over, and this is the path block. There's nothing really to it. It's quite simple. You just put it in straight lines and this is how it looks. Yeah, I mean, it's not too bad. Personally, it's not what I like. I like to have my paths a little bit more sophisticated, but there are people who do like paths like this, and that's absolutely fine. If you like a path like this, great. That's fantastic. It's not a terrible path, but it's probably not the best, where you could take that path design and jazz it up slightly to make it look like this, where instead of just having straight lines, you can have sort of interconnecting like bits like this. So where instead of having like a straight line of just path all the way, you can have the grass growing back in certain parts. It just makes it look more worn, and personally I think it makes it look a bit better. You know, it doesn't look as not used. I mean, at least this path, it looks kind of used. You would imagine people have been walking, or horses have been walking on it, or, you know, whatever. And it just looks a bit more wear and tear, and it looks more like a natural path. Or if you're looking for a wee bit more than just your path block and your grass block, you could always incorporate what I've got here is some cobblestone and some gravel. And this, personally, I feel it just makes it pop it a bit more. It adds another layer to it, it textures it a bit more, and just makes it look a bit better than just having maybe the 2 blocks of it. I mean, as I said, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to use that or something like that, go for it. As I say, Minecraft's personal preference. We all, you know, enjoy our own things. We all like our own things. So whatever, you know, makes you happy, go for it. But personally, I like just a little bit more added to my path, so they're maybe not as basic. I know this can be quite time consuming, but it does make it look quite cool. And I mean, this path, I mean, there could be a story to this path. It could be maybe a brick path at one point, or a stone path at one point in time, and maybe it's just got to the point of where it's, you know, it's fallen into sort of ruin. It's been walked on enough and not been repaired, and this is where like the path blocks and the grass blocks come in perfectly. So you can see that it has worn away and it's been worn over time, and just it adds a kind of like a story to it. So it has been, you can tell it has been well used either by people or by horses or whatever. I just think it adds a little bit more texture and a little bit, you know, it makes it look a bit nicer. But there is also the last one in the list for the villager path, and I like to call this the villager path final. And in this one, we've just incorporated a little bit more into it. So we've got like the mossy cobblestone, we've added the stone block, and we've also added a stair with water. So it just captures the feeling if it has rained. I mean, some paths have puddles on them because they've been worn away that much. You know, you get a lot of divots in your paths, and just adding that little bit of water into it kind of gives it that feeling that, you know, it is, you know, like the world is alive. You know, it does rain, and, you know, the path isn't perfect. It has been around for quite a while. And that's where I like the mossy cobblestone coming into it. It just adds a bit more character to the path. And of course, we've got a bit of andesite in there as well. There's nothing wrong with andesite. It's quite a good block just to incorporate. If you're looking for a bit more grey in your builds, especially when you're doing these sort of builds, this adds a bit more sort of texture and another layer to it just to make it look a bit nicer. I like this path. Personally, I use this path myself. I have this path in my Let's Play series, and I really enjoy making this. I know it can be a bit time consuming because there's a lot of different blocks put in, but if you want to put the time in, it can look great. But as I say, this is probably it for the villager path. I mean, there is other things, other blocks you could add in. This is just my ideas, but hopefully it helps giving you guys some ideas on, you know, if you want to jazz up your paths in your villages or your towns or whatnot. But let's move on to our next path. And path number 2 used to be an old favourite of mine back in the day when we all started playing Minecraft, and that was the wood path. Yeah, I just like to make this when I first started out in Minecraft. It's just taking wooden planks and laying it down. Yeah, pretty much similar to the path block at the end, but I think that was even before the path block kind of existed, or we were able to get it. It was just a wooden path, and I always thought that looked quite cool. Again, you can still use this. There's no reason why you can't. It still holds its own somewhere, I'm sure. People still enjoy it, and that's perfectly okay. But if you are looking to sort of maybe take this and maybe jazz it up slightly, then what you could do is you could always add the stripped strip logs in as well. For this I've used oak, as you can see, and we've just used oak strip logs as well, and it just adds a little bit of a, you know, a more texture to it. Just sort of breaks up the, you know, the plane into something a bit different. So maybe you could say that the stripped, you know, logs here have maybe just been wear and tear on the actual wood path over time, and you can tell it obviously has then been used. But as I say, that's only 2 blocks. If you are maybe to then take it to its next stage, you could come over here, and if you come over here, you can see we've added a different colour in. So I've used the spruce planks instead of, you know, oak planks in some places. And personally, I think it just adds another layer to, you know, your wood path. I mean, it changes the colour up slightly, but in some cases that's not a bad idea. Having a different colour in there is not always bad. I'm not saying this is perfect. This is just an idea, guys. It's to give you an idea on kind of what you could do. You don't have to use these colours. You can use whatever colours you wish. But as I say, when you're making these sort of things, make sure maybe the colours complement each other quite nicely, because you don't want to be using like a pink and then using like, I don't know, what colour doesn't go with pink? Like green or something. You know, just make sure that, you know, your colors are complementing. But also, we are playing Minecraft and it is all personal preference, so it is totally up to you guys as well. But if you don't want to make something look a bit more realistic, I would recommend trying to get a nice color combination that sort of goes together. You could say the spruce doesn't go with oak here. I think it works quite nicely because it maybe looks like the oak's been wet. And personally, I always kind of like that look. But that's just me. It could be you don't like it, but that's perfectly okay. I mean, you could always change it up for something else. But if you're not happy with that and you want to add a little bit more and make it look a bit more better, you could do this. And as I say, this is the final design for the wood path, and I've kind of done similar to the one we have over there, which is going to be running theme. We've put the stairs, and for this I've actually used path blocks as well. I didn't change the, you know, we don't have a massive palette here, but, and it may look like a bit of a mess, you'll be like, oh, that looks a bit of a mess, but it just adds a bit more texture to it. Instead of adding water in all the stair blocks, you just add some stair blocks as well. And we used the spruce and we used the oak. As I say, it doesn't have to be these colours, but with these colours you can get away with adding the path block in just occasionally, and it looks a bit more weathered and it looks a bit more worn down. And with the stair blocks in here without the water, it just looks like the wood's been worn away and there's been like a divot ripped into the wood. And then also we have it here so you can tell it's maybe been raining. And I personally think this looks quite nice. It's not the best, it could be made better, but it's just an idea, guys. But let's move on to our next path. And our next path is actually a combination of 2 paths, guys. We have the classic stone path, and we also have the classic gravel path. This one I'll use a lot when I would start playing Minecraft as well. And the stone path, I think we're all being guilty using this at some point. But that's perfectly okay. I mean, I still use this sometimes to the day, but it's perfectly okay. But what we're actually going to combine both of these 2 paths into one. So for our first design, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have the gravel and the stone, but then we're also going to incorporate some stone brick in as well. And it just breaks up the overall texture. I know it's all grey, but that's fine. If you're going for like a castle build or something very similar, this is always quite a nice little touch, you know, to add into your builds if you are creating paths around your castle like that. Personally, me and my friend, we used to use gravel going around all our paths, and that always looked quite cool. But if you want something a bit different, add a bit more character to it, a bit more texture, or a bit more depth, just maybe change the palette up slightly, and say you could have the stone, and I've added the stone brick as well, and it just adds a bit more texture to it. But if you are looking for a bit more than that, then you could do this, where you're adding in the mossy stone brick, and it just makes the path look a bit more weathered. I know I always talk about weathering and stuff, and I like that. It gives it a bit more of a natural look. So maybe, you know, I mean, paths in real life do get dirty after all. Maybe if you're not necessarily cleaning it, this just gives it that look. I mean, it doesn't have to be like this, guys. It can be a lot less on the brick and the stone. I know for a lot of the paths we've seen so far, there's been a lot just, you know, crammed into one, but I only had this sort of little space to sort of work with. I'd say you can separate it a lot more. You could have just a lot more stone, then stone brick occasionally going through it. This is just an idea, guys. It gives you an idea kind of what you could use or what you could do. But if you want to go maybe one up from this and go to the next level, then as you can see, the running theme continues, and this would be the sort of like the final, you know, path I would have for it, where we've actually used andesite stairs. And as I say, andesite is a great block. This is the polished andesite stair, and I love andesite when I'm making, you know, grey builds or castles and that. It just cuts away from the pure stone or the stone brick, and just gives you that little bit extra in your build itself. And as I say, for this we use the stairs with the water. And personally, I think if I were building this, maybe not perfectly like this, but if I was building like this in my castle area, if I had a castle, I think this would complement it quite well. Maybe if you imagine this going around all the paths in your castle, I think it would look quite cool. I mean, so you don't have to go with the water, it's just an idea. You can have it without the water and it just looks like there's been, you know, a chunk ripped out of your, you know, your actual pathway. It just makes it look a bit more weathered or a bit more worn down. Personally, I like the water. It adds a bit more depth to it. It makes like almost like your world is alive. I know the world is alive because it does rain in Minecraft. It just adds a bit more to it. But anyway, guys, let's move on to our next path. And our next path, guys, is our desert path, or I'd like to call the sandstone path. Yes, if you're making sort of desert builds and stuff, sometimes you can go with this, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it can be tricky to sort of work out where your path is. I know you can differentiate between sand and sandstone, so that's why in the next part of the path, I incorporated both. But if you are building on a massive scale and you are building in a desert, obviously there's going to be a lot of sand, and sometimes just trying to pick out where your path is, you'll be able to see it because, you know, you've got the sandstone mixed in with the actual sand itself, but it may not necessarily look the best. Because as I say, you are probably going to be building in a desert and it's going to be sand galore, and so try to pick out exactly where the path is, especially, I mean, yes, there's a difference, but if you're seeing it from afar, maybe it's not necessarily the best because they're both exactly the same colour, so you could break it up by adding in wood. Yeah, I've used birch here, strip wood and the planks, and personally I like this. The birch wood complements the sand and the sandstone very well. It's the same sort of colour palette, but it's a different shade, so it just takes the edge off the, you know, the full-on sort of cream that we have going on for the sand and the sandstone, and just makes it look a bit nicer personally. That's what I think. And we've gone with the stripped and we've gone with the planks, as you say. And I probably didn't mention it before, but for like if you are going to be using like stripped wood like this, sometimes just laying it in different orientations. So I've got this one going in that direction and I've got this one going in that direction. That adds a bit more to it as well. It just looks a bit more texturized. Personally, I really like this. This is something I would probably build myself. But if you're not happy with just having that, as it still does look kind of plain, you could take it to the next level. And for the final product, we have, as I say, we have our sort of running theme with the stairs, but that's always quite nice, I personally find. And this is kind of what I would hope that I would build if it was me. And we have the sandstone stairs just incorporated through. I didn't put water. Personally, I felt like water in a desert was maybe a bit weird, so we just went with maybe like the chunks taken out of the desert, because I suppose that could happen in some way as well. I know sand blows, but personally I like this a bit better than just having, like, you know, the first one there, which is just complete sandstone. It just adds a bit more texture to it. And at least if you have this in your desert build, and it's, you know, it's actually in a massive sand area, you'll be able to pick out exactly where your path is. Or if you're doing, you know, like a desert village itself, making some of this would look quite nice and would probably complement the wood style or the sandstone or sand builds that you'll have for your buildings going round. Anyway guys, let's move on to our final build for this episode. And the final path for this part of our two-part episode is the brick path. Yeah guys, I really like this path. This path in itself alone, I would probably have. Now, I know brick can be quite hard to come by if you don't have the villagers for it. I know you can go mining for clay and rivers and stuff, but sometimes it can just be a bit of a pain to get. But this path in general is quite nice. But if you're not happy with just having the brick itself, you could move on and use granite. Yeah, granite in a brick path is actually really quite nice. I used granite quite a lot in my builds, or at least for some of them, and with granite and brick, I actually think it complements it perfectly. Yes, it's the same sort of shade, which is great, but it's off, you know, the colour's off just that much that it's not too far away from what the, you know, the original colour itself, but it complements it quite nicely because it just takes the edge off the brick. Same with the brick takes the edge off the granite and it makes it look very nice. But if you're not happy with just having those two, then you could up it and go with the polished granite. Polished granite is actually a favourite of mine. Now, you do use it quite a lot in a lot of the builds I actually build with. And I actually personally think this path right here is something I would definitely use. Without, you know, going to the final stage of our path build, I really like this. This is something I would probably use in maybe like a steampunk village or a steampunk city. I think that would be quite a nice build, or even just in a normal, you know, medieval city, you could get away with having something like this. It looks quite nice. Also, using these blocks for buildings is quite a good idea as well, and you can create quite a nice industrial look with these building blocks as well. So if you're making an industrial build and you want to have paths going down an industrial build, this would be a great idea for it. Or if you're not happy with just this, as I say, you can take it to the last iteration of this and you can have this. And for this last bit, we've also used just the standard terracotta block. Again, another sort of reddish block, and it just breaks up ever so nicely. That this path, I think, is actually one of my favourites between this and the first sort of dirt, you know, the villager final path. this is probably my favourite one I have built, I think. And again, we've used the stairs with the water. Again, I think it just breaks up quite nice, as I've said before, and it just makes it look a bit more weathered. And having the granite and the polished granite is a nice little touch. It's a nice addition. I really like it. I also added, as I said, added the terracotta in, and having the terracotta just gives it that final little touch I think it needs, and it just rounds it off ever so nicely. That you've got all the same sort of color palette, but they're all just different enough that they don't clash too much. I mean, you could obviously incorporate different colors into this just to break up a bit more, but personally I think this actually works quite nicely. And as I say, if you've got an industrial build or you're doing an industrial area or whatever, this would be a nice sort of design for a path area, you know, going around your industrial builds. Hopefully I've been able to give you some sort of idea of different styles of path that you can build in your overworld using different materials. As I say, these are just ideas, guys. After all, in the end, it does come from you. I mean, you can copy my paths if you want, go for it. But we all have our own ideas, we all like our own things. These are just my ideas, and I hope I've been able to help you in some way. As I say, this is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be coming soon. It's behind this wall, which I'm currently working on, so look out for that, as it will be coming very soon. But if you have liked what you've seen, by all means, leave a wee like on the video. That'd be great of you. And if you are new to the channel, and this is your first time experiencing my videos, then by all means, maybe consider subscribing as well. That'd be really helpful to me as well. Anyway, guys, that's it from me today, and I'll catch you guys in part 2. Bye, guys!